Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I don't want to talk about a specific book that I read, but rather at the beginning of the month, it is time for the wrap-up and TBR video. What did I read in December, and what do I plan to read in January? And because it's the start of a new year, what do I plan to read in 2023 as well? I have a number of books lined up, shorter than previous lists because I haven't gotten to all of them in previous years, but I'm fine-tuning the list, finding the exact number that is good to have set out, and then I'm attacking those books. And they're all books that I know I want to read this time, rather than just saying I want to read them for the fun of it, because I feel I need to read them. I'm trying to make it so I read what I want to read and not simply what other people have said is good and reading it for that purpose. At least that's what my thinking is. In terms of what I read in December, though, I read very little, not as much as usual, just because I was on vacation from work. There was also a blackout due to the heavy rain and strong winds that Central California, Northern California was experiencing. Hopefully we're through the worst of it, and this is the worst that 2023 is going to bring. But it's good to be prepared about these sorts of things. So yeah, I didn't read as much in December, but overall in total I did read 143 books and short stories in the year of 2022. Very happy with that. I think it's the most I've ever read in a single year. Even going back to high school and whatnot, because as much as I love to read, I never attacked books like I'm doing now, which I really like. I do like this sort of renaissance of me reading much more than usual, because I'm not only am I reading, this fiction, I'm also reading a lot of nonfiction that's challenging me and forcing me to think about the world in different ways, which is very important. Comment below with how many books you read. It's not a competition, of course, but if you read more than usual, that's great for you. And if you haven't, well, at least you're still reading, hopefully. I also made a best of list for the month of 2022. Go check out that video. It's one of the videos that I did pretty recently, at least at the time when I'm talking. And I do have lots of books planned for 2023. And as well as January. I do finally want to get to Lolita, a book that I've heard a lot about, but I haven't explored myself. It's on the banned books list, which is always a focus for me, because a banned book can be weird, but also the reasons for banning it are weird, which is very in line with what I'm trying to do for this channel. And I also have those 10 specific books that I want to get to, which if I find it, there we go, in my notebook of books. This is like the fourth notebook that I've been working on since I started this this booktube channel. But the 10 books that I want to read in 2023 are Macbeth by Shakespeare, The Last Temptation of Christ by Nikos Kazantzakis, Tortilla Flat by Steinbeck. Gotta love that Steinbeck. The Violent Bear It Away by Flannery O'Connor, since I enjoyed A Good Man Is Hard to Find so much. The Iliad and the Odyssey, which I'm combining as one, by Homer. Native Son by Richard Wright. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume, and The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. All books that I've heard some things about and that I've been wanting to read for quite some time, but haven't pushed myself to do it. In the past, my lists have been longer than that, but these are 10 books that I know I'll probably get to in 2023. So I just wanted to make it hyper-focused and set, achievable goals instead of creating a list of 25 books that some I might never even get to because of all the distractions of reading there can be. The last order of business that I want to talk about for this channel, before I get to the wrap-up and TBR, is that I've created a Discord channel for Around the Weird, where we talk about books, but we also talk about memes and video games and other such things. If you want to join and be a part of the Around the Weird discussion group, or just talk about books, or just, share your knowledge of the world in general, I will put a link to the Discord in the chat. You're more than welcome to join, as long as you don't bring a toxic influence to the community. So yeah, if you have any other questions about that, let me know. So without further ado, let's talk about the December wrap-up and the TBR, and we will move on from there. So what did I read for the month of December? In terms of books and graphic novels and whatnot, I read Stuck Rubber Baby, which I thought was good. Probably one of the better books of the month in terms of exploring race and homophobia and all those ideas like that, and terror, especially living in a place where everyone hates you, and there's a fear of coming out, or a fear of letting people know who you are because of the way they'll react. A lot of good ideas there, and I definitely recommend that you go seek it out if you haven't done so already. Also, I read Teen Idol by Meg Cabot, which was a lot of fun. Felt like a good change of pace in my Meg Cabot reading experience, because so often she likes to avoid conflict, but here she seems to choose to run headlong into it, and it makes for a good reading experience and like a good story. And I think if I were a teenager, I probably would have absolutely loved that book, and it'd be on my list of favorites or something like that, purely based on nostalgia purposes maybe. But I do think it's a very good reading experience right there. And then I read Volume 4 of Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. I do think it was good, but I wanted to see more things, given that Volume 3 was so amazing. I do intend to read Volume 5 still, but Volume 4 just left me feeling like Alan Moore wasn't doing as much as he could with the series with that particular installment. Also, he seemed to end the central conflict in Volume 4, so I don't know what's going to happen in Volume 5 or 6. But I look forward to it, because Alan Moore is always a writer who can throw some surprises your way. I also read Emiko Superstar by an author whose name I forget, but I'll put up here in the up there. I thought it was okay, kind of bland. It has a problem that I see a lot of graphic novels have, in that it rushes through the story and doesn't really stay in the moment and focus on the ideas that the author was focusing on. So it ends up coming off a little bland. I think that's one of the bigger problems that graphic novels have, is that they just rush through, and they don't give the story or the themes time to breathe, which sucks. And then I also read Torn Apart by Dorothy Roberts, which I thought was great, maybe the best book of December. I read it for the book club that I'm a part of with my friend Bevan. She recommended it based on her own work in the social work field, or her she has had some work, but she's studying to be it, so it's kind of a mix there, putting the cart before the horse or whatnot. But yeah, a lot of interesting ideas, and it definitely got me to see the Child Protective Services and the idea of social work and social workers, and the child separation policies of the state and federal government in a new light. And it's like I kind of knew these ideas before based on my knowledge and previous experience with these institutions, but seeing it all here kind of made me aware of how much the CPS and other related organizations are a problem, and that we so often target Black individuals with child separation, and especially poor individuals, and we leave these organizations really unregulated because of the idea of if we don't give them massive power, then what's going to happen to the children? But we don't care what happens to the children once they're in the system. So, it's a bunch of terrible arguments that go nowhere. I do recommend that you read this if you don't know a lot about Child Protective Services. It can be a hard read, but it is a very important read in terms of making the world a better place. I also read Charlotte's Web, which I thought was good. Very, very sad. And I know the movie that I had watched previously was sad, which made sense given the themes involved, but I did not expect it to be so adult and to treat children like they were adults, because the author whose name I'm forgetting, E.B. White, sorry, but E.B. White is oh yeah, sometimes your friends will do things that you don't like, but you can't change your friends unless they're like vastly murdering people. And like Charlotte may have been murdering bugs, but she pointed out that if she didn't do that as nature intended, bugs would swarm the farm and the earth in general. And that was a very good point. But also, I like how E.B. White's like, death is a part of life, and sometimes you lose your friends, and the best way to honor them is to carry on their memory. And I think that's very beautiful. So, like it's a good book in general, but also like good for treating children like they deserve respect, which is something that so many young adult authors often forget to do. And then I also read All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison. Kind of expected a lot from this because Grant Morrison is a well-regarded author, but also a lot of people hyped up All-Star Superman. I only read volume 1, but like I've heard so many good things about it, but this one just seemed like Superman confronting the fact that he may die soon and also fighting a couple of villains along the way. And they're interesting fights, but I don't see it as like that great. If this is the best that Superman has to offer in terms of comics, I'm not really sure I want to check out more comics by him because it just seems so average. Maybe that's because I've read a whole bunch of Batman before and those were super exciting, and this is not really exciting by comparison, but more down to earth. I guess I was just expecting more than what this comic was actually providing. I also read a number of short stories, including Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster, which I thought was kind of forgettable. Don't really remember too much from what happened to it, and maybe that's partially because it's been like an entire month. But I've remembered other short stories, so I think it's just forgettable in that regard. The Elves and the Shoemaker I also read, which were by the brothers Grimm. I thought it was pretty funny and very interesting from a cultural aspect in helping us understand, the lore of this region of Europe, and also understanding the history of stories and how they're passed down. So I think that's pretty interesting. And then I also read The First Christmas of New England by Harriet Beecher Stowe, which I thought was largely boring. One of the biggest problems is that Harriet Beecher Stowe was an abolitionist who frequently talked about race and slavery and those ideas. And for her to not even mention the slaves that came over on the Mayflower or how they were instrumental in the founding of America seems like a bit of a cop-out, or a bit of a miss for her. If she wasn't an author who frequently talked about that would be one thing, but she focused on that in Uncle Tom's Cabin, among other stories, and here she's not even bothering to mention it, just creating the myth of the founding of America and whitewashing it and doing everything in the power to make it seem like these pilgrims were ordained by God to come to America, when in reality that is not what happened. If you know anything about the history of the pilgrims and whatnot, you know that this kind of makes it seem like they were more pure than they actually were, and not as prone to error or murdering Native Americans or whatnot. But I don't know. I guess it's something that maybe Stowe wasn't trying to say here, but it does come off a little bit of whitewashing history, which is my biggest flaw, or probably my biggest letdown from this short story. And then I also read a number of poems from 2023. Some of them were about the holidays, focusing on Kwanzaa, Christmas, and Hanukkah. Go check out those poems if you are interested in them, although it's January, so I don't know why you'd be interested in Christmas still. Although some Christmas holidays or Jesus-themed holidays do run until early January, so maybe that's why you would be interested in them. But go check them out in the Poetry Thursday video playlist that I have. Now, what do I plan to read in January? As I mentioned earlier, I do have a number of books that I want to get to, and some of them I will be reading in January or early February if I can't get to everything on the list. As I mentioned before, I am reading The Big Friendly Giant, the BFG, which is kind of meh so far, just because a problem that I'm noticing is that Roald Dahl tends to rush through some of his stories, and this one feels like a little bit of a rush. I also plan to read The Dwarf, which I got from my local library. It's an Italian book from the 1950s. Seems pretty interesting. Looking forward to seeing what the author says about various things. I also am going to read Believing by Anita Hill, which is a book club read for this month. Anita Hill was the sort of law clerk, I think, who worked for Clarence Thomas, and then later called him out on the sexual assault that he was like issuing towards her, but as well many other people who worked for him. Clarence Thomas being a pretty significant monster based on what I've already read, so I'm very interested in seeing what Anita Hill is saying and believing. I think this largely applies to gender violence in general, but I think she might talk a little bit about Clarence Thomas. If you don't already know about that, I do suggest you go out and read it, because Clarence Thomas there's a lot of issues with him in the present moment because his wife was involved in the January 6th insurrections, and he is also a terrible human being who doesn't believe that abortion is a human right, and is actively working to dismantle democracy in America, among many other things. But and it's important to know that so that we can fight against that and possibly even have him removed from the Supreme Court. But I doubt that's ever going to happen. But it's important to know about that kind of thing. And I'm also really interested in reading Anita Hill's story, because I'm sure she has a lot to say there. Of course, I also want to get to Volume 5 of The Saga of the Swamp Thing by Alan Moore, so be on the lookout for that video. And then there's a number of library and comic book reads that I want to read when I pick them up from my local library, or just buy them in general, so be on the lookout for that. And then, as mentioned before, I do want to get to Lolita by Nabokov. I've heard a lot of good things, a lot of weird things about it, and I do think it'll be a perfect fit for this channel, as I might have said already. And then Tortilla Flat by John Steinbeck, which was one of the books on my list. I'm slowly making my way through all of John Steinbeck, and I'm very sad to say that apart from his short stories and his nonfiction, I might be almost done with every single piece of fiction that he has to offer, at least long format fiction, which is sad, because there's no more, and he's such a great writer. Even in Cannery Row, where I think his writing isn't as good as it can be, he's still a quality writer, and he has a way of writing a story that gets you enthralled in it. And to not be able to get any more of that, it feels really weird when you've gone through all of your favorite author and don't have much else left to explore. So hopefully I'll be able to find another author like Steinbeck in the future, or I can just go back and reread East of Eden and Grapes of Wrath and all of that, because those were high quality books. And then there are a number of short stories that I want to get to. There's When Watched by Leopoldine Core, which I got from my local library. Again, don't forget to patronize your local libraries. And then I also want to read I believe it's an Italian children's fantasy fairy tale, Puss in Boots. That one, I found it when I was looking through Grimm's fairy tales short stories, and I thought it would be funny if I read it. So be on the lookout for that in January. And then there's going to be a number of other ones as I find them and as I become interested in them. So be on the lookout for that. And of course, there are a number of poems. I got some good ones lined up, so some that have spoken to me, so hopefully they'll speak to you as well if you're interested in Poetry Thursday. Anyway, that is what I read in December and what I plan to read in January, as well as much of 2023. If you have any recommendations for me, or if you want to say something about one of the books I talked about in 2022, definitely say something in the comments below. Let's have a discussion, and I would just love to hear if you have any perfect recommendations that might wow me in the coming 365, or is it 363 days at this point? Who knows? But very much looking forward to it. And yeah, without further ado, or not without further ado, but messing up this part. It's been a while since I made a video, so yeah, if you comment below if you want to talk. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or as I mentioned, join the Discord if you want to, share videos or spread the message of Around the Weird and get people more aware of this channel. Or until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and 2023 channels or 2023 travels. Farewell.